welcome to The World Musician. My name is Soorya Ramappan. One can hardly find a genre of music that does not require a rhythm accompaniment. Some rhythm instruments are used playing sticks, and some are played with just the bare hands, using intricate finger movements. One such instrument is the tabla, a rhythm instrument originating from ancient India. This ancient Indian instrument has traveled all the way to Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the hands of well-known tabla maestro John Churchville. John is a musician, educator, and producer from Ann Arbor, Michigan. John has been performing and teaching music for over 20 years and continues to break new grounds on both fronts. He has performed all over the world and is versed in many different styles of music. He is a specialist in Indian tabla drumming, drum set, and performs regularly and records. As an educator, John has taught lessons, classes, and workshops to thousands of students of all ages. He's the current music director at Go Like the Wind School in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he teaches general music, beginning and advanced band, jazz band, and string orchestra. Hi, John. Thank you for being on the show today.
It's great to be here.
So, tell me a little bit about your experience with the tabla, how long you've been playing, and what you found how it relates to Western music and the drum set.
Okay, well, I started with music and drum set before I can remember, when I was a young little guy back in the early 80s. And we lived next door to the marching band in Northern Michigan. University marching band, and my mom told me that I loved listening to the drums every day. And from there, I've always had sticks in my hand, playing on things. And it wasn't until 1998, I moved out to California, went to California Institute of the Arts. I went there to study hand percussion and just to kind of expand my understanding of percussion in the musical world. And I sat down in front of a tabla ensemble. It was like 6 tabla players. They were on stage. They started playing and went on for 25 minutes or so, just playing perfectly in sync. They had no music in front of them, and they were just joyful, happy. The sound of the drums is incredible, and so I tell people Indian music didn't bring me to tabla. Tabla brought me to Indian music because I first just heard the drum. It was just the drum. I had no idea really where it came from. I had no idea how they were making those sounds or what the sounds were, but I just knew that I wanted to try that. And so I went the very next day and I asked, how do I get into playing tabla here? And it just so happened at California Institute of the Arts, one of the world-renowned tabla maestros, Pandit Swapan Chowdhury, is a teacher there. And so I had my first lesson with Pandit Swapan Chowdhury, my first lesson on tabla. And from the first day I tried it, I just never stopped. And that was 1998. I've continued to perform Western percussion. I love the drum set, playing on the drum set. I play with jazz groups and all different kinds of groups, but tabla is my instrument, the one I practice. It's the one that I study. It's the one I keep coming back to, and it keeps giving back. There's so much to this instrument.
people, they always recall their first lesson or their first experience with a certain instrument. So how would you say your first experience was with the tabla? Was it something that was challenging for you, or did you start out as something that you were comfortable with?
Well, like I said, I was very excited to start.
Yeah.
My first experience was I took a set of tabla and I went outside, in California. It was a beautiful day outside. And I went out and sat on the cement patio. And I got yelled at. And there's like, you should not be sitting on the cement patio. One of the teachers, I don't even know who it was, but he came out. You should not be sitting on cement with your legs are going to hurt and everything. And, sure enough, after like 20 minutes, I couldn't even sit anymore. So my first experience was very painful. It was sitting on the floor and getting the position and getting everything right. And I remember after 2 months thinking, wow, this is really a dedicated craft here. Yep. It's every sound that comes out really requires intense focus and lots of repetition and lots of practice. So it was something that being in music school, my first year in music school, taking music seriously, really seeing it as something I was going to do the rest of my life, it was the perfect thing because it brought me down to a beginner level. I was an accomplished percussionist at the time for my age. I had played in front of thousands of people and things, but tabla just brought me right back down to a beginner. And so I had to start over with a musical training again. And so it was just, and still is something that I keep learning from, just the way of practice, any kind of practice, whether it's, meditative practice or spiritual practice, music practice, any kind of practice. Tabla is right on par with some of the highest levels of thinking and of awareness that you need in order to really play it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the tabla specifically is one of the instruments that you can never learn enough from. There's always so much that you can keep so much knowledge you can keep developing. So what have you found fundamentally that's different from the tabla, the technique, and different from the drum set?
Well, different obviously is the sticks. On a drum set, you have sticks, and that can't be understated because when you learn on a Western drum set, and you go to a music school, and, you can play a drum set when you're an infant. You get a pair of sticks in your hand, and you can make the sounds loud and nice and clear right from day one. Tabla, of course, is not like that. You need very intricate technique. So learning to play the sticks is something, learning to handle the sticks is the primary focus when you're in studying music. And so you learn how to bounce them. You learn how to bounce them 2 times each, 3 times each, and the bouncing allows you to play very fast and get this very high levels of rhythm going on. Well, you get to the tabla and you cannot bounce your finger. Yeah. It doesn't do 2 hits at once. It does 1. So you're controlling every single sound, and that's something to be noted because while both require an intensive amount of focus and discipline to get to a high level, the not being able to bounce your finger means that you have to learn and play and practice every single bit of your speed. You can't just double it by a bounce, right? Yeah. So that's the biggest difference is the speed. Learning to play the different levels of rhythm. What I mean is you play something fast, and if you play it fast enough, you start to hear the rhythm underneath it. You start to hear bigger rhythms, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and you can play these fast rhythms on a drum set or with sticks pretty quickly compared to tabla. It takes years to get to that speed, that level.
long have you been playing the tabla?
Well, it started in 1998, and that's when I started then. That was September of 98, and I just never stopped. So you can do the math, whatever it is now. Yeah, it's getting up there a lot of years now. Yeah, it's been something that's been in my life. It's a daily thing in my life, and I absolutely love it.
So in which ways have you been able to translate your experience in the drum set with your experience in tabla?
That's a good question, because that's definitely something that, once you dedicate yourself to the tabla, it's kind of an all-in thing. Mm-hmm. Like you have to keep doing it and keep practicing. And like you said, once you start, it opens up. The more there is, the more you learn, the more you find there is to learn. And so when I am playing on the drum set, I find that the tabla, the training in the tabla influences the drum set in two key ways. One is that the rhythm theory and the way you learn rhythm in Indian classical music, and specifically in tabla, it's so intricate, it's so involved, and there's so many facets to it that you really have to have a mastery of the fundamentals of rhythm, being able to keep a beat and keep that beat steady while you're thinking of other beats and everything. We were talking about that earlier. And on the drum set, it's very easy to keep. It's a simple task. I mean, I say this maybe because I've been doing it since I was younger. Yeah. It's not simple for just anyone to sit down and do. But you play these beats and you can sing over it. You can, there's all kinds of things going on over it. Well, tabla allowed me to start thinking about many more directions you can take the drum set. In many ways you can start playing it, and maybe not the standard hi-hat, snare drum, bass drum, but you turn off those snares and maybe you hit cymbals and you just start thinking about the drum set providing that foundation for the tabla over it. So that's one thing, studying, and I think this comes from studying two instruments. It's not just tabla, just drum set, but if you study another instrument, you start to get the musical perspective from a different way. So you start to see, tabla can't shake an arena like a drum set can. Yeah. When you put a big PA system behind it. It can be loud and it can be very powerful, but it doesn't do what the drum set does as far as keeping that huge beat. And so that huge foundation is something I grew very used to. When I got to the tabla, now suddenly tabla is kind of like, I see it as almost, if the drum set is the floor, the tabla is like a gymnast that tumbles and twists and flips all over the floor, always keeping that floor solid underneath, but the tabla can do acrobatics when you play. And so it's like this different level. It's like a playful level, but also, of course, it gets very, doing some very serious musical ideas that you can get out there with the tabla.
Yeah. So. One thing that one of my drum teachers told me is that playing the drums is like falling down the stairs while trying to read the book. So I feel like that can also translate to tabla, except what would you say is the difference in how you show the beats? I know drums, you can read it off sheet music, but how would you be able to write down tabla music, or how would you be able to categorize the compositions that you write or learn?
Yeah, well, it's in tabla you have a language, the language of playing the drum, and so you're learning to speak this language. It's so eloquent, and it's hard to even understand if you're not a percussionist or a rhythm person as to how advantageous it is to have this amazing language and this, every sound that the tabla makes, ta, tu, na, all of these sounds that are very specific, creating this rhythmic poetry. You put them together, they make words. So writing them down is easy. It's like writing down poetry. And the different teachers that you have different ways of thinking about how you develop different themes and things. And so your writing can look like a code. So it can, you have 16 beats. And so the first variation might be 1 through 4, 1 through 4, 1 through 8, 1 through 16. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, then 1 through 4, you come up with these different combinations of putting together the theme. And so on one sheet of paper, if you're talking about writing it down, you can write down a composition and then 20 different ideas, ways to develop it, the variations of it, and have 20 minutes worth of music sitting on one sheet of paper. Because of this language, you're basically just rearranging all of this language. So on the drum set, it's a little more, I call it gridded out. It's on the grid. You have a grid that's labeled. We work in 4 most of the time. So it's labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. You split that up, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you split that up again, 1 E Anna, 2 E Anna, 3 E Anna, 4 E Anna. Or you split it up into 3s, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so then you go about putting in the different beats in different places. So the low beat comes in on 1 and 3, the high snappy beat comes in on 2 and 4. And so you can start filling in this grid with the drum beats. And generally speaking, when I'm teaching drum set or when I'm thinking drum set, I'm thinking in terms of 2 measures at a time or 4 measures at a time, as far as what is the theme of what I'm playing, right? It's generally the same as tabla. So the translation, there's no language for drum set. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing you can write down that compares to tabla.
Yeah. So the different kinds of rhythms you would have in Western music would be like 3/4 time, 4/4 time. What are the different rhythms or tals that you would be able to play on a tabla?
Yeah, I think actually this is where the 2 rhythm theories can help each other. Yeah. Because in the Western sense, we're trained to think, like you said, in 4 or in 3. Yeah. It's just in a very general, broad sense, 4 and 3. Whereas in tabla, you have, there's not this just general sense of playing in 4. You can play in 4 in 4 groups of 4, and that's tintal. Mm-hmm. And that's laid out in a very specific way so that it's in a form of the first 4 is the A section, you repeat the A section, then you have a B section, and then the A section again. And so it's dressed up. It's a little more fancy. It's not as general. And so because it's dressed up like that, just the basic beat keeping has a form to it. It's not this just a general keeping a rhythm very straight, but it has already this eloquence to it in just a basic rhythm. And so when you start elaborating, you're going into even more. I think of it as if you compare it to a piece of furniture, there's boxy furniture that is very functional that you can stack like IKEA furniture, let's say. You stack it, it can package very nicely and everything, and it comes out and you can put it together in many ways and you can do all kinds of things with it. It's wonderful, very utilitarian. But then you have the handmade, hand-carved, intricate furniture. And in Indian music, I think in general, this is kind of, it's something that's so much older, so much more developed than the music of the West, especially when you're talking about rhythm, that you have this intricacy to it and all these details to it that are just amazing. And those 2 things can help each other. You can have a utilitarian and then the tabla player playing over the top of that. Mm-hmm.
So would you like to show us tintal?
Sure. So this is that 16 beats, very basic. It goes da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, ta, ta, din, din, da, da, 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 din, din, 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 ta, din, din, da, din, din, da, da, da. So that's 3 different levels of fanciness,
so
right?
There's I'm guessing there's a lot of different variations that you can put on each individual tal.
Yeah, my first teacher, Pandit Sopan Chaudhary, explained it to me like this. Teka, that tal, teen tal, is like a blank canvas. And not every artist uses the same canvas. Some artists have a square one like this big, some use it very big, but everybody paints a different picture on that canvas. Everybody uses that canvas in different ways. And so Tintal is like your own personal canvas. And so everybody has their way of playing it. So it can be infinite, as many as there are people, of ways of playing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So have you found that there's ways that you can take a drum beat and then translate that to the tabla?
Yeah, and it's not particularly easy to do, but it's interesting because when you've learned the language and you learn how these things go, these phrases, these rhythmic poetry, like I said, when you translate drum set to it, sometimes this poetry starts to sound like you're saying a little gobbledygook, you know, or it doesn't sound quite right, or it doesn't sound like anything that's in the canon of tabla repertoire. So therefore, it's a little odd, and so yeah, you know, one of the things, like I said, there's no language with drumming.
Yep.
So when we think about it, either we're counting 1e and a 2e and a 3e and a 4e and a 1e and a 2e and a 3e and a 4e and then in order to understand which are the lows, which are the highs, we actually have to do it with our voice, right? So you get this as much as you can with your voice, beatboxing and whatnot. And so what I would do is start as the main. So I take the sounds ge and ta, and I just use those to make the fundamental of the beat. Ge, ge, ta, ge, ge, ta, ge, ge, ta, ge, ge, ta. Where it gets tricky is to add in the hi-hat. That's keeping the like a drum set. On the drum set, you just have a simple motion that's happening. But on tabla, when you add it, suddenly you add a sound to other sounds and the words change, right? So now it's not just ge, ta, we have so that is the drum set beat. I played it for my teacher, Pandit Samar Saha, and I played it. I said, "What do you think of this?" You know, and he said, "Not tabla." That's what he thought. That's all he said is not tabla. And then he said, "Here's a composition that sounds just like this." And he gave me a composition that's in the official canon that's similar. It goes then again, taka then again, and then again, taka then again, taka then again, and then again, like this. Then again, taka then again, and then again, taka then again, taka then again, and then again, taka then again, and then again, taka then again, taka then again, and then again, taka. That's cool. Yeah. It's not the same. I don't hear the drum set beat. Mm-hmm. When I'm listening to that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not drum set. So there's kind of the line, a very interesting little thing where he hears where it's very similar to the tabla repertoire, and I hear where it's very similar to the drum set thing. But the two things don't come together completely, where this is where you have to fuse. This is where the term fusion comes from. Mm-hmm. You know, you have, and so this is a little experiment that we did then, Samar Saha and I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to a drum set and play the beat, and you play yours, and I'll play mine. And now he once I played it, and then he's like, that's what you were doing on the tabla, and he's like, yeah. And then, an interesting thing happened, he played what I played. He then saw that, oh, you were translating that. That was where the fusion actually happened. It was it happened in just one afternoon and just opened up. This is what fusion can be. You come to an understanding, you come to where things are similar, and then you have to step over into the other realm a little bit. You know, Samar Saha doesn't play drum set, not at all. And so he didn't know or had no perception that this beat was coming from there. So, but once he saw and he heard and he stepped over, then suddenly we could fuse very, very well together. And that's I think, you know, generally the case in all of music. Yeah. Musicians from anywhere in the world can do this thing, just taking a little bit of time to figure out how it works together.
Yeah, so. And that's amazing how while he's your teacher, given your experience in drums, he also was able to learn something from you and learn how, like, it kind of opened him up to a whole other world of rhythm.
Absolutely. And you know what he said, though, is he said then after, there's no rhythm that can be played on any instrument that I cannot also do in the tabla.
That's cool.
And it completely true, too, by the way. Like, that was about 10 years ago he said that to me, and I was younger then, and I was like, But since then, that theory has been tested over and over again, and yes, anything that can be played on the tabla. Just like anything that can be played on a drum set. You just need to have the understanding of where it's coming from and what it is you're doing and interpreting. Yeah.
So your current teacher, Pandit Samarsaha, how long have you been with him?
He comes to Michigan every year around September. I think I first started with him in 2003. He came. He's been coming before that, but we did. When he comes, it's very intensive. Last time he was here for, I think, 6 days, and I sat with him 19 hours in 6 days.
Wow.
And just got a whole bunch of work, a whole bunch of things to work on, and a whole bunch of things and ideas. You know, I'm not, I tell people, I'm not an Indian tabla player. I'm not playing the classical repertoire. Most of my work comes in this fusion, in working with other musicians from different cultures and combining and things. So a lot of my time isn't spent on just the classical canon of Indian tabla playing. So when he comes, he understands that, and he's willing to play with me. And so he helps me develop that kind of thinking, where that thinking can be translated to drum set and whatnot. But there's so much to learn with tabla that we spend most of the time on tabla. Yeah.
Wow. So thank you so much, John, for being here
Absolutely.
today.
Absolutely.